Hi, this is Derek.
This is Miles.
And this is
In Session.
Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 3 of In Session with Miles and Derek. Today's episode, we'll be talking all about discipline and leadership and how that can impact students both inside and outside of the classroom. We have a wonderful guest on the podcast today, Mr. John Heatley. Mr. Heatley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am John Heatley. I work with the Center for Undergraduate Student Achievement here at BRCC.
All right.
So let's start with, what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership, to me, I often refer to everything from a personal experience. I mean, there's no doubt that there is clinical definitions of leadership, but since we're having a podcast to eventually speak to students, then I think it's always important to be intimate in your context. So for me, I grew up with some very good leaders, starting with my dad, who was a highly disciplined man. And there's many stories I can share. Just one, though, is I can remember early on me and my sister being asked to every night come in and kiss my parents goodnight, and they prayed with us, and that began for me a discipline. And then I later on I could think about a second person in my life that taught me a lot of discipline. It was when my high school basketball coach committed to me to help me get to college to play ball. To be fair, I didn't have the strongest of academic backgrounds, and so he taught me a lot about weightlifting, training, showing up every day, working on your craft. And so now that I'm in a position in educational leadership, it was easy for me to pivot from what I've done in the athletic world, and I apply those disciplines to education.
Yeah. So, what are some of those skills or those attributes that you've taken from basketball and that you're applied to education now?
Well, everybody believes that they can play.
Right.
Yep.
But everybody don't believe that they need to actually work to play. I was blessed that after I played high school and college basketball, that I got involved in officiating high school basketball, which led me to an opportunity to be identified and referee at a Southeastern Conference camp. And then at that camp, I was identified by the National Basketball Association, right? And at that time, early 90s, the NBA only had 12 officials in the entire country that was a part of that program. And when I went to a training camp, identification camp, I had to beat out 80 other referees to get in that position. And what I learned was that, showing up with the jersey on, you could look like a referee, but there were things that I had asked, very pointed questions. How do I become one of the top referees in the SEC or in the NBA? And what I was told was you had to learn 3 books. You had to learn the mechanics book, the rules book, and there was a second book that addressed character of an official, right? And so I apply that to this. I think in order to have a foundation of discipline, you need to figure out what is it that I should be doing. We call the rule of 21. 7 reps of what am I listening to every day? 7 reps of what I'm actually tactile, what am I actually doing in that industry, and 7 reps of what I am hearing. So, 7 hearing, 7 seeing, 7 doing. And when you get to a point of doing something 21 times, you develop what we call a habit. And most people do not want to commit to the habits to become disciplined.
So I was great. While you're talking about you're a sports guy, you like basketball. How would you say you built your discipline? Would you say you built it over time? Would you say you were born with it? As you talked about, you had people in your life that you could point to. Would you say those those people, those individuals would kind of help you, and like in times of struggle, you would look back to them, because as students, we all look, everyone can do schoolwork, but
Sure.
it takes schoolwork itself is not hard. You gotta put your mind to it and focus on it a little bit.
Right.
Same thing with basketball. Everyone can dribble, but not everyone's LeBron James.
Correct.
So how would you say you became so disciplined, and were you born that way, or did you build it?
No doubt. You're not. I think we're all born with inherent gifts. I believe that. But I also understand that those gifts have to have what we call stewardship. To answer your question, individuals have to get to a point where they want to ask themselves, how effective do I want to be with my gift? You shouldn't be chasing your gift. You should be chasing the guidance for the gift, right? So I started chasing the guidance for gifts. And so since we're talking about discipline, wasn't born with it. It became something that I acquired, but it also became something I desired, right? And so before we started the podcast, we talked about influence of people around you. Sometimes if you are at the top of your pyramid, you may feel that you can't learn from others. I've always been taught to stay at the bottom of that pyramid so that I look to people who are far better than me. So to answer your question, over a period of time, I became more and more passionate about becoming someone that was effective, someone that I'm just using basketball, but my education is my life now. But, we used to talk about how can a basketball referee have sustainable success, meaning get more calls right than another referee. That means you got to go home and watch that film.
Right.
So when we talk about students, oh my goodness, when we're talking about we're right here in the tutoring center, digital learning center, and we have resources for them, but those resources will only be effective if they go home, get alone, get in a quiet space, go over notes. So the last thing I'll say to answer this question before we move on to the next is journaling became a major deal to my discipline in life. Before I developed my second brain. Now, your second brain, guys, we don't have enough time to go into it, but your second brain is everything that you use digitally to keep from trying to remember something 10 days ago.
Right.
So my second brain is about 4 different platforms that I use. But before I had a digital platform, I had books. So I journaled. So for me, if we're talking today about success, none of us have the type of brain capacity where you can remember everything that is said, spoken to you, or experienced. But if you start journaling those things, so I got journals that go back all the way to when I was about 12 years old, when I would wake up from dreams and write my dreams down. So when you guys see Mr. Heatley, a lot of times I'm still living off of things, not that I remember, but that I can go back and read and say, that's some turning points in my life. So that's kind of what supports a lot of what you see with me in discipline, is that I believe in journaling and I believe in being a good steward of repetition.
I love that. So you mentioned journaling. I too, when I was in high school and going forward, have journaled as well.
Sure.
I believe that journaling in itself also, while it builds discipline, also is a way to hold yourself accountable, which also kind of feeds into discipline, because you can't be disciplined if you don't hold yourself accountable to your process.
Yes. Yes.
And you touched on a couple of things that not only that I know through the experiences being a tutor here, like when you mentioned journaling, I thought immediately to like how not often I work with students who don't even take notes, like physically. They may type things on their computer, but it's not reaching them. We talk often about how just writing things down, simple things down, helps with that learning process, helps with you remembering things. And we're talking at the beginning of what you're saying. You're talking about kind of how you go from just learning or getting through something to actually like learning it, right? So there's a difference between just going through the motions and getting your assignments done, getting even the grades that you want, good grades, and actually like getting that guidance, getting that that information, like having it internalized, learning what you want to, what you should be learning. And I see a lot of students that on that one side where they just want, the assignment's done, they just want the grades, they're just trying to get to that degree. But I have to, or we have to ask them, and they have to ask themselves really, like, what is the point? Like, what are you actually working towards? What are you going to get out of this other than just, a piece of paper that has a degree on it? Are there any other, like, skills or attributes that you think students need to get from that one side to the other side?
Absolutely. I couldn't wait for you to ask that question.
Yes.
There's a saying that I learned: you read to learn, you write to understand, and then when you want to get to the next level, you teach to become a master. If a student, a lot of students that I talk to that come to BRCC, I have something that I enjoy immensely is that all the coaches allow me to talk to some of the recruits and their families that come, right? And I start sharing different tenets. One of the top theorists that I utilize in my research here at BRCC is Arthur Chickering. And Arthur Chickering is the author of many, many human development frameworks, and one of them is he believes that there's 7 vectors of human development that a student must transition from the day they start college to the time they graduate. When you talk about a person's agenda, you find out very quickly if their agenda is just to show up and have a certificate of attendance, or if they're showing up and to actually transform through the 7 vectors of human development by Arthur Chickering, right? And that deals with competence, that deals with managing emotions, that deals with your identity, your purpose, things you need to learn. Ben Franklin said that many young people by the age of 25 die, but they're not buried until they're 75. But what he was saying was, a lot of us have aspirations because we look around and see the guy next to us or family members, and we go, I want to be an astronaut. And then all of a sudden, when we get older and get closer to that age of commitment, we find out, I would like to be an astronaut, but I don't want to go through the training. I would like to be an educator, but okay, so how long I have to go to school? And so when we have students that come here, they all come with the dreams, but what we here at BRCC, I think, do a very good job at, and it's a part of why the particular funding from our grant supports this institution, is the transformative factor. It's supporting the academic side of the institution and the student affairs side of the institution, and to understand that we just can't teach them in class, but we also have to develop them through skills. We have to develop them through maturity. We have to teach them about how to manage relationships and manage their emotions. So to answer your question, it starts and ends with this. Anything that you choose to read, your brain function, your neural cognitive function, and I've studied metacognition, you build what's called cookie cutters within your brain. Well, what's a cookie cutter do? When you build a cookie cutter, you want to be successful enough that every dough you place in the cookie cutters, the cookies come out the same. Right. We're talking about discipline, right? Right. So when you build educational frameworks, cookie cutters within yourself, because you're reading to learn, then when you come back and you start writing, journaling, right? We just talked about journaling. So the writing is the journaling. Now you're filling that cookie cutter with the dough. Now, we're going to get to something that I think we're going to talk about a little later. I'm just making an assumption. But when you talk about how does a young person or a human being present themselves to the world, you should be a model of behavior type that others would want to follow. So when you build your cookie cutter and then you're filling it with, reading and writing, and then now you want to go and share that information with your peers, it's causing you to go from level 1 to level 5 to level 15 of the ability to have sustainable brain function, where you can actually regurgitate information to pass either a writing exam or a computation exam. And that's important when you're talking about education, right? The institution of education is that we're not at a place where we can have many people. We do have a wonderful professor here. He'll be Dr. Simon at some point, but he is experimenting and researching cognitive understanding by having people present more than they actually have to fill out a test.
Right.
Well, society ain't there yet, but that is what I'm talking about. So right now, a successful student, as I close on this thought, is one that understands that they have to become avid readers, they have to become avid writers, and they have to become avid modelers to others. And that's how you personally grow, and that's how you become a sustainable leader and a successful person within society.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad you spoke about that because, as from a student's perspective, having started at BRCC, I was blessed enough to have people like yourself and a couple other people like Dr. Sahara, who we had on our first episode, and others who hopefully we have later on this podcast, to give me knowledge like you're dropping here on this podcast.
Sure.
That I'll take into my school life.
Right.
And hopefully I'll take it and apply it throughout life as I go forward and as I graduate.
Right.
And I feel like I always say to some students that I tutor is that you go through high school and stuff, and you just go through the motions and stuff. Then you get to college, and it's like, bam, you gotta decide what you want to be.
Yeah.
People ask you all the time, like, what you
Right.
want to be, what you want to do. You don't always have the answer, but now you're at college. You have to actually answer that question.
Right.
And I think hearing people like yourself speak, I think people will find a route to that answer a lot easier than they otherwise would.
And I agree with you by saying this. The extra 4 years that a young person, if they're given the opportunity to go to an academic institution, is a very necessary incubator to figure that out. There's some of us like me, if I didn't go to college, my dad made it very clear I was going to have to move out when I graduated, and that meant get a job. And so if it wasn't for me finding that institution to try to actually get those extra years to mature and develop, figure out the answers, Miles, as you're speaking about, jumping straight into the frying pan, that we call that where the rubber meets the road. And sometimes that's tough when we're not fully developed.
Right.
Yeah, no, I relate to that so hard, because like you said, it's absolutely a blessing when someone that is young can have that opportunity. Not all of us get that. Like for me, for example, my personal experience, I went to LSU right after graduation, but I did not have the skills I needed to to do what I need to get done.
Sure.
And through taking time away, having to actually get a job and work, and all lifing,
Right.
I was able to come back as a completely different person, a different student, and actually get my 2 degrees, my associates and my bachelor's now.
Yes. Congrats.
Thank you. So I think that's something that a lot of students don't consider, is just like how big of an opportunity just being at an academic institution like this and having the opportunity to learn more and grow more as a person, like how big that is. Because a lot of people, go straight in from high school, whether or not they have the skills to succeed in college, case by case, but a lot of people go in and just think, okay, well, I need to just work to get this degree, and then
Right.
then afterwards, whatever happens will happen, right?
Right.
I'll get a job, that's how life's supposed to go, but life doesn't always work that way, right?
No, it does not.
No, it does not. So you mentioned, a little foreshadowing, mentioned a little bit about like modeling, success for others. How do you model all of these, great skills, or how do you model for other people and lead through example?
By being absolutely transparently humble, by not walking around with a fake disposition, by being willing to say, if asked, how are you today? And if I'm not feeling good today, say I'm not really feeling good. But I think that the way we should model, the foundation of modeling successful behaviors with other people, is you need to be someone that can be relatable to all people. So I will share something you just talked about. I got scholarships to play basketball, but I wasn't a strong student, so I didn't last playing basketball very long because the academics ate me up. So then when I left that one college, went to the second college, and now I'm working full time, trying to keep up an apartment and go to class and do a full load of electrical engineering at this second college.
Right.
I did that for another 4.5 years and struggled immensely. And then next thing you know, I had to drop out, stop out. Because when people say drop out, that's not using the word properly. The true definition when students stop out is that, you know, they leave and then they do intend to come back. So now I'm at the age of 23, 24, and that's when my independent contractor career took off in athletics with sports. And so now I'm married with kids, and I recognize quickly, man, if I don't keep getting these contracts, I'm not qualified to go get the type of employment that I want to keep my family lifestyle going. So at the age of 30, I had another major life issue occur, and it led me to get my behind back in school. And guys, at the age of 30, when I went back to school, like you were talking about, it was a total different, mature attitude for me. It was a, you know, non-negotiable. I had to get this done. So fortunately, I was, after all of those years of schooling that I had before in my 20s, I got out in 2 years with a business degree, right? I give God the glory for that. The next thing you know, I said, hey, I accomplished this. All right, let's go back. And then now at the age of 35, I get my master's in education, right? So then I got 3 kids who are all now 31, 24, and 17. Well, my beautiful kids got to see their dad graduate, which was really more impactful to them, right? Yeah. And so, and my beautiful wife, she's an Army veteran. So the next thing I did was about 4 years ago, or whenever the pandemic started, I said, it's time for me to get my doctorate. And now, prayerfully by the end of the year, I'll have my doctorate at the age of 54.
Yes.
So, man, everything we've talked about, it's a full circle moment, because you have to be honest with yourself. I honestly am honest with people. So when I share with people, I'm not giving them all the good stuff. I'm giving them the bad stuff. Like a lot of bad decisions that I made, a lot of decisions that, you know, wasn't my decision, but life happened to me. You know, raising young kids, you know, being responsible, but somehow through grace and mercy and support of a community around me, such that we are building here at BRCC for many others like us, is that you keep your eyes focused on you know, the main thing, and that is, the main thing ain't your relationship right now. The main thing ain't worrying about the bills you owe right now. The main thing ain't your particular disposition or your prideful position in life, what people think of you. The main thing is getting educated, because it transforms you. Not just the paper, it transforms you to being a person that could be effective and a contributor to society.
Yeah, no, that really resonated. I very similar experience. Like I, you know, just like I said just a little bit ago, you know, stopping out. I like that term a lot better than dropping out. Stopping out for me completely just changed my outlook on education. I don't think I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to be, but I did not realize what I had to do to make that happen, right? I knew like, okay, I'll go to school, just get through school, get my degree, go do this job, whatever. But like the smaller stuff, like, okay, how do I make sure I'm getting my work done while I'm balancing 2 jobs, and you know, this is happening in life, and how do I manage all of this stuff happening at the same time? You know, things like that was not on my mind at the time. You know, I was young. I'm like, okay, I have this freedom. I'm in college now. That's all that matters.
Perceived freedom. But go ahead.
Right.
Yes, definitely. But like coming back and getting that push from, you know, a close family friend who just kind of sat me down and said, you are way too smart to be working dead-end jobs and not doing what you're passionate about. Coming back after that, definitely, you know, my outlook completely changed, and having to consider all these things at once made me a completely different student. I knew, like, okay, I was making enough money to survive. I was, living comfortably for like me being by myself and everything like that. But like, I definitely realized, like you said, like I don't have any qualifications for anything that
Right.
will improve my life or like
Right.
improve me as a person, or, I can pay these bills, but like, what am I getting out of what I'm doing right now? That was definitely like a big thing that I had to learn, and I had to like just take in
Sure.
when I came back. So I'm glad you touched on that.
So, while I like all that I'm hearing you, as always, every time I talk to you, always drop some knowledge on me, every single time without
No
fail. As you were talking, you mentioned how you've had a lot of experiences that made you change how you see life and make you more humble. And
Yeah.
too often I hear, when I speak to people who are older than me, have lived through life, often is the most humble people have been humbled.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so especially with, this is our spring semester, a lot of students will be a lot of students might be transferring after this. As for me, I'll be transferring to LSU.
Right.
How do you, when times get tough, keep up your discipline? Because you're, as we talk about, sports guy, you're in the gym, you're practicing, nobody's watching you. It's very easy to kind of get, lackadaisical with it, get lazy.
Right.
Feel yourself a little
Right.
bit too
For
much.
real. Yeah.
Right.
How do you stay on track even though no one's watching you? I mean, you're an adult, no one's watching you.
Right.
So how do you stay disciplined, stay focused?
As easy. I've learned that we are all spirits. We possess a soul and we live in a body, right? The spirit has a voice, the soul has a voice, and our bodies have a voice. What I've learned in my lifetime, that when I need to stay centered. See, your soul is your emotional quadrant, right? And if we are too overly imbalanced in our emotions, then we leave our spiritual quadrant, which keeps us full of our identity, knowing what we believe and who we are, right?
Right.
Well, if emotions are the language of the soul, then feelings are the language of the body. So, as I set the context to answer your question, you said, how do I stay focused when we might be talking about the subject right now of students that's about to transition to a 4-year school or a new school? How do I even now keep myself centered? I get quiet, I get still. There are things in my life that when I can tell that the vibrations of my life are getting chaotic and things are getting too busy for me, I cut away. I think that you got to always give yourself the time to understand that out of the 3 parts that I just mentioned, you are your spirit, right? And you need to make sure you give yourself time to go through an opportunity to slow your breathing down, right? So that you can focus on what am I really doing here? What's my real purpose? Like, my real purpose is not a title. Our real purpose and calling in life, guys, is not the degrees that we have, right? Some people live with that. They lead with that. I used to lead with I'm NBA. Man, I wasn't NBA. I wasn't even SEC. I was a person, but I wanted people to and I'm letting y'all hear it now, right? I'm being honest, humble, but that was shallow.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say to anyone, spend some time finding out how you're made and what keeps you centered. And whatever it takes for you to do that, it might be bike riding, it might be reading a book, it might be church, it might be whatever, but it needs to be something that reminds you of who you are, so that when that real you goes anywhere, you don't become consumed about where you are. You bring you to that place and consume it. So if we're getting ready to move on to next levels in life, you should be doing at the next level what you was doing at the first level. And that is, who is John Heatley? What does John Heatley believe? How does John Heatley take care of his body? How does John Heatley take care of his spirit? How does John Heatley manage his emotions? How does John Heatley manage his feelings? Because if I don't manage them, I become a lot of things that John Heatley don't like.
Right.
That people won't like, right? And so to be successful is to know thyself. You have to, identity is the key here.
Yes,
I
love
like that, especially like you mentioned that, like how everyone likes to chase those titles, those degrees.
Sure.
Especially as younger students, you know, like you mentioned earlier, you come out of high school, you don't know exactly what you want out of college, but you know you want that degree.
Right.
But you got to figure out why you want it. And I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
as you spoke to, you know, you've had to figure out that answer, and I feel like a lot of students will benefit from hearing that as they
Hope so.
go through this journey themselves of trying to find the answer of why do I want this degree, what job do I want to get out of this, why do I want that job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you touch on identity, especially I see a lot of students that don't have, you know, a solid identity. So that's where a lot of these issues come from, is they don't have a clear image or vision of what they want out of things, right? They just know they want those things, and it's even worse when you see students that like are constantly comparing themselves. Like I've always heard this phrase, like, just because, you know, the car next to you passes you up doesn't mean your car is stopped, right? We're all going on our journeys, but because you see other people doing things doesn't mean that, you know, you're falling behind or you're moving in reverse, anything like that. So I really appreciate it, and like I want to reiterate like that point about just finding identity. That's such a key thing.
Sure.
We talked a lot about identity, and like kind of going back to the talk about staying humble and staying open. I love that approach, you know, just being incredibly honest with people. Like you said, like if you're not having a good day, not trying to hide it, just saying like I'm not having a great day. Whether or not you want to share why, you know. Where did you like develop that approach to, you know, your interactions with others? Like, is it someone you got it from, or is it some like naturally, you know, you came into that decision like I want to be a more open person? Like, how did that happen?
It's my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I have a faith, and in my faith, I believe in my Creator, and I believe in reading, right, and spending time meditating. And so, what I have, in the most humble of ways to articulate this, what I have learned is that authenticity can only come from you being okay and comfortable with yourself. So it comes from my faith. So like when I'm struggling, there are things within my faith that remind me of who I am and how to manage through my issues, right? I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And I believe that we as people were made to have a belief in things, okay? And so to answer your question without getting too deep, because a lot of things are personal, but I've said enough to say this. I maintain my stability based on my faith, and there are things that I do with my family and myself and with those that are in the faith with me, and I with them, that I try to make sure that, so when I wrong someone, I understand the principles of making things right.
Right.
Okay. When I react a certain way and it wasn't a way that I wanted to react, I understand the steps that it would take to say, okay, how can I be honest with myself and actually implement reading, writing to go and remediate that particular behavior.
Yeah.
I've been married 30 years. Trust me.
Yeah.
My wife has a lot to do with my growth and development. Otherwise, I would not be married to her, right? And she and I together with our beliefs, you know, we are so real. You'll catch us 1 minute, you know, fussing like cat and dogs, and the next minute, you know, we done put that in check, and now we good, right? And so all those things tied to the one thing: what is your faith? What is your faith in? What type of belief you have in this life? And so it's easy for me to be authentic because I ain't got to make nothing up. Everything's going to tie back to one thing. The reason why I now want to be successful in life, the reason why I care so much about what I do here, is that I was once just like these students who was, you know, 25, 30, something years of age, trying to still make it with kids and married. And But man, there's never an excuse because life is treating you bad for you to be a bad person to other people, right?
Yeah.
So that just doesn't work. It's never an excuse. You still have that soul quadrant where that's where your will lies. Your thinker, your chooser, your subconscious, your conscious mind, it lives in the soul. So the soul of a person is determined by the person because they have a will. So, there used to be a time in my life I didn't like me. I didn't like how I treated people. I was mad at the world. And I had beautiful people around me saying, "Oh, no, we're not gonna let you do this and just think that's okay." They held me accountable until I started to hold myself accountable. Miles, you talked about that. How do we do that? You got to have people in your life that'll hold you accountable until you can hold yourself accountable. So who you're around really matters. And so all that ends and begins for me with my faith, my belief.
Yeah. And just to follow that up, so for people that may not have that support system that holds them accountable,
Okay.
What would you recommend? Because they'd have to then hold themselves accountable at least until they can find those people that can help them out and that can hold them accountable. What kind of tips or tricks or advice do you give?
You ever wanted something you didn't have?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You ever wanted something so bad? Let's say something that we all can identify with. Man, you like that young lady, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really know how to approach her. You don't know how to start the conversation, but you have a will and a desire. For someone that does not have a network, for someone that does not have maybe a cluster of people or a person, it starts with a desire to understand that you have a power within you to believe and attract and manifest what you don't see. It's faith. I just prayed not long ago, you know what? I really need some new people in my life to really, really push and challenge me. And so about 3 months ago, I said to my creator, to my faith, to my person, I would like some new people to come into my world. And guess what? New people came into my world and I was open. When you come to an institution, a college institution, let's get more practical and get out of the spiritual for a second. If someone's at this institution at BRCC, man, just come into the DLASC. Just come in here. You're going to meet people and you can expand your network. Come into the 3rd floor of Magnolia, where the Center for Undergraduate Student Achievement is located. You're going to meet some people there. You can meet me and build your network, right? You can go to the student center, we call our student union, and just sitting there and walk up to someone. I mean, college is supposed to be the place that you come out of your shell and do things that make you uncomfortable. So your question is, how do we help someone build a network who may think they don't have somebody? Then you got to become somebody that's willing to be so interesting that others want to be around. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you have to have a whole lot of conversation. It just means you have to have a will and a desire.
Yeah.
And so, but every building on this campus, I have noticed that there is a network of people that work here at BRCC and students that walk around this campus, and I've never seen a student not open. Yeah. So someone sometimes I teach my kids this. I've taught them this whole life. Go over there and introduce yourself and start a conversation. Do I have to? Yes, you do. That's the real issue.
Right.
We just so afraid to walk up to somebody. Miles, remember you and I met?
I do.
I heard so much about you, right, and your family, and I was like, well, I need to know him. And at the time, I was an advisor here, and then I got to watch Miles over the years, and it's like, wow. And so him and I interaction, I don't think I've ever made you feel that I was above you.
No, sir.
Right. I don't think I ever made you feel that you didn't have something to offer me. I think we've communicated quite a bit, but people need to, and that's what. So there's a life skills program that's a part of the center called the Series 12, and then we also do the Hero's Journey with Professor Eric Elliott. And we teach the tenets of transformative living, where you can learn how to have what? Human development, So if anyone is interested, by all means, come to the third floor of the library and, take a gander at coming into the center and come meet some people. And I'll be there and we can help them start that process.
I love that. From my personal perspective, that's how I got my start. I had a friend of mine who brought me up to the third floor, and I met a lot of individuals who no longer work here, but they led me to meeting you. And
sure,
but going up to that third floor, having that conversation, and kind of just starting somewhere, not necessarily starting in the exact right spot, but just starting in general,
yes.
has led me to working here. Going up there led me to talking to certain people, led me talking to you, gave me my job here,
right,
and has allowed me to meet so many different people. And as I said earlier, I've never had a conversation with you in which I didn't feel like I learned something, and I feel like that's something that's too often missed when talking, especially when talking to your peers as well as your administrators.
Right.
We often have conversations that don't stick with us
Right.
sometimes, and I feel like that is something that's missed. We need to get back to having those conversations where I learn something from you and you learn something from me, and we both walked out of that conversation slightly more intelligent.
I agree with you totally.
Okay, so now it's time for the final bell. This is our segment when we ask one last question and just wrap things up. So, Mr. Healy, what is, one piece of advice or one lesson you would give to a younger version of yourself as far as, how to develop into a leader, a highly disciplined person, and work towards, succeeding and accomplishing, the goals that you have?
Wow, that's a very, very intimate question. But fortunately, I do have an answer. But again, this is laying it out, putting it all out there in honesty and authenticity. When I was coming up, life tries to force you to believe that everybody is bad people and situations, are against you. And if I had to go back to my younger self, I would want to continue to support that when there were people in my life telling me, don't worry about those things. Don't worry about when someone reads you wrong, someone lies on you, right? Or when someone just they never met you, but for some reason they treat you the way they treat you. Don't feel that you have to change to match that type of energy. Continue to be the person that you believed you should be, and that is just keep being a positive person. I can't say good person because I was too young to understand goodness versus anything else. But, the younger we are, we're still living in innocence, right? So now, as an adult, what I would tell all of us, the older we get, when you start seeing what's going on in the world today, there may be a belief that things are bad. But, man, there's people in this world that things can never be bad. Like, for an example, my wife survived breast cancer. Can't be bad. So to my younger self and to myself today and to anyone listening to us today, my advice in life is continue. Don't let the exterior world change you or make you into something that's not who you are. And if you're going to be successful in anything, you got to know who you are, and you got to navigate in areas that deals with goodness and kindness and positive support or for others. So that would be my final statement on that.
Oh, wow. So, thank you again for dropping all these gems. I've like Miles said off record. I think every time there's a conversation with you, it's just there's so much to take in and so much to carry.
Most definitely
carry further into our lives and apply to what we're doing now and in the future. nature. So thank you for sitting down with us.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing this knowledge and wisdom.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving our podcast a listen. We're excited to bring you more content.
You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. Thanks again.
This has been In Session with Miles and Derek.